Welcome back to another EXP podcast. I'm joined by my co-host Luan.
Hello.
And we have two guests with us, Alfie and Cairo, and we're going to be talking about taking a mentorship this month. So, Alfie, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Alfie Summers. I'm a recent graduate from Staffordshire University and currently a contract material artist at Marmoset. I've not really been doing this for too long, but that's pretty much all I have.
And Cairo.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. My name's Cairo Goodbrand. I'm an environment artist from South Africa, and I currently work at Next Gen Dreams, which is a worldwide, fully remote outsourced studio, providing art for both indie and AAA. I've been with them now for coming up on a year nearly, and I've been lucky enough to work on a couple of cool projects for them in that time. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, so to start us off with, so both of you took mentorships not long ago. Were they both with Mentorship Coalition?
Yeah.
Mine was, yeah.
Okay. So to start us off then, let's talk about why you chose to do a mentorship. So let's go with Alfie again first.
Well, I chose it because at my university, we didn't really have much substance designer teaching, and that's always been the thing I've been most passionate about since I discovered it. And I was getting to the point in my own self-learning where I felt like I had sort of peaked and I wasn't really sure where to go from there. So I thought that getting someone else to tell me where I could go was probably the best option.
And who did you do your mentorship with?
I did my mentorship with Josh Lynch, who's like the big material guy.
Yeah, cool guy. We had him on before, haven't we?
Yeah, he's cool.
Out of curiosity, do you find that comparatively with university, this is something we're going to get into a little bit more later, but like, does the guidance of a personal, like just for you kind of way help you more than something a little bit more general? Or do you find that maybe, I don't know, like do you find that you could learn plenty before, but just this little guidance helps you a little bit more further along the way?
Yeah, it's like having the individual attention to point out the specific needs that like for you helps a lot more than, say, being in a class where everyone needs the same, everyone wants feedback and you only have a limited amount of time. And there's like 30 people or 50 people to go through. So it's kind of, you don't get that much individual focus. And even though that can be really helpful to point stuff out, it will often miss things, you know?
So why did you choose a mentorship with Josh then over anyone else who offers it? Or over any other type of material learning that you could have picked from?
Well, at the time, I really wasn't aware of many other material art mentorships. I know there's now Dynasty have, I think there's with Ben Wilson and maybe Alex Beddoes for material art. But I really wasn't sure of any other options for it. But the option that was available isn't a bad choice. So that's really why I went with Josh over anyone else. But there were
a pretty good choice.
Like, yeah, it is a pretty good choice out of all of them. And I did consider like maybe environment art mentorships from people who are good at materials and trying to get that, but I just went with the sole like material focus.
You really wanted that narrow focusing on the specifics of materials rather than something a bit broader.
Yeah, exactly. It helps a lot more than kind of getting a bit of everything.
Okay. And Cairo, who did you do your mentorship with and why did you choose to do a mentorship?
I did my mentorship with Joby Kamika, who's now a principal environment artist at Respawn. And I had a bit of a different experience from Alfie. I'm almost completely self-taught in game art. I studied civil engineering at uni, and I sort of graduated with that degree, worked in that field for a couple of months, and then very quickly realized that it wasn't the job for me. So I sort of had a crisis of identity, and I decided that I needed some type of formal education in the space if I was going to justify that sort of career change. So when I made the jump, I started looking at different mentorships similar to Alfie, and I sort of realized that the Mentor Coalition was, where the really experienced people were for a one-on-one experience. So yeah, I did the world building mentorship with him in July of last year, I believe. And yeah, it was a really cool experience. I think sort of by definition, the environment art mentorship is a little bit more varied than the material one, whereas the material one is sort of hyper focused on designer and sort of the different, softwares that relate to that. The environment art one was a little bit more varied in that because we were building a full scene from scratch in those 4 weeks. So it was really jumping about from the block out to the composition to the lighting. And yeah, quite a bit of stuff was done in those 4 weeks and after.
Nice. Out of curiosity, what made you choose games in that scenario? Like, have you always sort of been interested, or?
Yeah, it was something I picked up in uni. I wasn't the best student. I think my interests were already showing elsewhere even during the time I was studying. So I think one day I just downloaded Unreal and I was just playing around with packs and stuff like that. And I very quickly realized that the stuff that I was seeing in my head, I couldn't just, put onto the screen with like pre-made assets and stuff. So I was really interested in learning about, modeling, texturing, all of that. So I could really, put forth my visions. So yeah.
Fair enough.
So what did the environment mentorship look like? What was the kind of structure? You mentioned a bit about going from block out and then through, you did a whole environment, but what did that kind of look like on a week-to-week basis?
Yeah, so as I understand it, it differs from person to person depending on their individual goals and such. But for me personally, I wanted to work on an environment from start to finish as much as I could in that 4-week period. So I decided to start from scratch with something with him and present him with that idea and that concept, and he could sort of help me with the refining of it and, scoping down if we needed to and all of that. So essentially we had an hour and a half calls every Sunday, and we would just sort of go through the process from composition to block out to planning out your materials, your modeling, your sculpting, and all of that, all the way through the end. And he was very helpful with coming to each meeting every week with individual notes that were personally tailored to me and my scene. So I think that was really cool to have that sort of validation as a self-taught learner, as in, like I would watch YouTube videos and Udemy courses on this kind of stuff, but I never really knew if it was the right thing to do. So having that industry professional telling me, yes, this is exactly what you need to do, A, B, C, D, this is how you get to the result that you want, that was, invaluable.
What aspect of mentorships do you feel like didn't work so much for you? Not that there were like failures on the mentorship themselves, but like maybe something that you feel like, I don't know, perhaps a different learning method could have helped you better with, if there is any.
I understand that one of the huge benefits of the mentorship is the one-on-one approach, but I think there is sort of a tendency with mentorship projects that people do, they sort of keep it between them and the mentors, whereas I think maybe I could have benefited from sharing that specific environment with like Discord communities and stuff maybe earlier, just, get a couple of extra eyes on it. But I think, that's the same discussion as whether you're more comfortable learning in a university classroom environment. So, yeah.
Fair enough. I was just curious, really.
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me there. Like, of course, I had people from university I was showing my lectures because I did the mentorship alongside one of my projects at university. So I kind of had extra eyes on that as well. But it definitely would have been better. I did kind of keep it under wraps, and it would have been nicer to show like experience points and other communities.
Do you feel like, was that by choice or?
I definitely did it by choice because I wanted to see what I would get specifically from the mentorship. But I did also have like classmates also giving me feedback. And it wasn't purely the mentorship in that case.
Did you have contact with your mentor sort of between meetings? You said that you sort of meeting up once a week, but were you able to send them stuff in the meantime and ask questions? Were they sort of available?
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, I could, contact Joby on Discord at any time of the day or night. And obviously all the mentors are busy people, but they do their best to get back to you during the week. And maybe it's not as focused and as in depth as it could be during those 1.5 hour sessions, because I think that's where all the, you really got into the nitty gritty of it. So yeah, but they were always really accommodating. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's the same here. I don't know if it was the same for you, Cairo, but I could message Josh throughout the week between the sessions if I had any specific questions. But it was also laid out where you could submit any questions, any whips and stuff on a Notion board, and then that would be what we tackled in our 1.5 hour session, rather than kind of going into it empty and then seeing what happens.
Yeah, we had something similar. It was like a weekly diary sort of thing that we had on Drive, or might have been Notion as well. Can't exactly remember, but so we would just jot down thoughts in there, any questions either of us had for the other, because I think it is sort of like a back and forth more than it is one way from the mentee to the mentor. And yeah, I honestly still look back on that weekly diary just in case I forget something that, I might not be thinking of at the time, but might be relevant. Yeah, it's really helpful.
It's always good to keep those things and look back on them. I find that even stuff that I wrote during uni, like years and years ago, like sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh man, yeah, I should really do more of this. And yeah, it's good advice, that.
Yeah, exactly right. Because we have so many things to juggle all the time at work and on personal work and all of that. It's hard to keep track of it all. So yeah, it's always nice to have a little, timeline of events or something like that.
So, in your guys' opinions, what do you think are sort of the biggest takeaways that you got from the mentorship? That can be compared to other things, or can be just kind of on its own.
Alfie, do you want to go for that?
Yeah. Okay. Honestly, I think the biggest thing for me, I guess there were two things. One was kind of my confidence in actually using Substance Designer and talking about it and just in what I do. Since I was like, I would say I'm self-taught in Substance Designer. I had university for fundamentals of like everything else, but it really helped with kind of the way I thought about it, the way I handled it, the way I spoke with other people about it and gave feedback, and everything to do with just how I felt doing it. It really kind of made that for me. Before, I was really uncertain. Should I be doing materials? Should I focus more on environments? Should I do this or that? But it kind of helped me set that path that I then followed. But the second thing, I guess, would be that after doing the mentorship, I then also got in touch with a lot of really cool people who I still talk to now and get feedback from, and have that sort of discourse and those avenues to improve through, which has been the biggest boon for me recently.
So was that through a Discord from the Mentor Coalition, or was it through connections that they had?
Yeah, the Mentor Coalition does have their own Discord, but I think the biggest part was after I uploaded my finished piece from the mentorship, I then got messages from artists from studios that I really want to work at, saying, "Hey, nice work. This looks like what we've done in what I did in this game." And then since then, we've just kind of kept chatting, and it's been really good in that sense.
That sounds pretty good. And Cairo?
For me, I think it was definitely sort of establishing a process for environment art that you can sort of take into the workplace and beyond. So before I took the mentorship, I'd only made I think maybe one environment, if that. So I was coming into it very fresh. I knew how to use Unreal to a certain extent, like I mentioned, from playing around with pre-made assets and stuff like that, but I didn't really have an idea to do it all myself. So I think a tendency that I had before this was that I would rush into it too quickly, as I think a lot of people do. And so I would so if I had a list of 50 assets, I would sort of say, okay, asset 1, need to sculpt that, retopper that, bake it, and get it into engine, and that's one asset done. Whereas that's not really how it works in production. You sort of have to work in phases so that you can mitigate any wasted time. So, for example, in the first week of my mentorship, we did the blockouts and we finalized all of that, and we got in some basic placeholder materials and sort of just established the look and feel of everything. And then once everything was sort of established like that, with sort of a bit of a squint test, you could then move on to the rest of that. So I think that was really important for me, and that's probably what I've taken most into the workplace now, is that you can't sort of charge into everything and get everything looking pretty straight away. You sort of have to just, go through the motions and get everything done in the proper order. Because it really just, like I said, it stops you from wasting time down the line if you've sort of iterated too far.
What was something that you didn't expect to get out of it, that you got out of it, that you find it really useful now?
For me personally, I expected to be a lot more inside sort of every software with the mentor. So we would obviously screen share every week, and I would show him the progress in Unreal, but we hardly ever jumped into Max or ZBrush or Designer or anything else like that. I think he could tell that I sort of knew what was going on there, and I could get stuff into Engine. So it was really a lot more technical stuff inside Unreal than I expected, honestly. I thought, I didn't know really what to expect going in, so I thought that maybe we'd be inside Max going over, like clean topology and stuff like that. But honestly, we really focused on a lot of story building and storytelling. And yeah, it was interesting. I didn't expect such a strong focus on that.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it was similar for me. Like, I also didn't really know what to expect going into it. I knew it would be with materials and designer, but I wasn't sure what else. And I guess the biggest part of it wasn't necessarily... I thought I would come out of it with a bunch of new ways to combine nodes to do certain things. But the most surprising part was like more core lessons with everything that weren't actually to do with the software. It was more like, I guess, offhanded things that Josh mentioned to me when we were going over like my material and the progress I'd made, that are like lessons that have like stuck with me ever since, that I've also repeated to other people who have been learning designer. And it wasn't technical knowledge, but just I guess fundamental knowledge and theory of it that I didn't expect to learn during the mentorship.
Yeah, I mean, when you're teaching someone or mentoring a junior or anything, like the skill that they can pick up really easily, or the skill that they probably already kind of have, really is the modeling and that kind of stuff. So you really have to find a way to sort of develop their other skills, either by asking questions. If it's a material, you want to find out how they thought about it. You can improve that mental process, right? So I think that's really good, because you don't want to get stuck on, how do I model this? How do I model that? Unless you're taking, of course, a very technical mentorship on modeling guns, maybe, I don't know, right? But yeah, that's good that you guys took that away from it, because I think that's a really valuable thing to sort of take with you.
I think also with these industry professionals, as they all are as mentors, they have the sort of offhand knowledge of most facets of the pipeline. So for example, just some quick shader tricks, or like something that'll make your foliage look 100% better just with a couple of clicks of the mouse. They sort of have this all on hand, and it doesn't even really occur to them that this is important knowledge. It's sort of like, oh, you can sort of just swap those material slots around, do this, do that. Yeah, so I think half of the time they don't even know how valuable the information that they give is, because they've been in a production environment for so long that they really have a excellent grasp even of the way that everything needs to be optimized, everything fits together. So I think they really give you that information in a sort of offhanded way, which feels sort of surprising, but it's really good.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of information that you learn starting out in the studio, right? And I think as someone that's coming into a mentorship, learning that before you even start makes you, I guess, an even better candidate, right? But it also puts you in the production mindset like ASAP pretty much, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's the stuff you can't learn from tutorials as well. You can't go and watch a YouTube video or buy a course that will tell you these things. It's that knowledge from someone who's had those years of experience, who's fought on the battlefields of making games and watched as everything crumbled around them. Who knows kind of how to deal with issues and knows how to fix things, and they've got that kind of mindset, and they can teach you, or they can give you that knowledge or share those tips that they've learned.
Yeah, it's not exactly easy to package that knowledge anyway, right? Like, it's not like I can sit here and be like, okay, let's teach people about, let's make a new YouTube like series to teach people about the production pipeline. And you can obviously cover a lot of stuff with that, but there's so many little bits and pieces that will probably be left out, either because you just hadn't thought about it or because it just doesn't fit the description and the scenario that you're presenting, right? So it's honestly, it's all that sort of like offhand knowledge that you just get by working with people, really. So that's I think that's a super powerful aspect of mentorships.
And it's all first-hand experience, right? Like, how many YouTube videos can you watch where the person explaining some kind of concept says, oh yeah, we use this on Star Wars? Like, it's just a crazy experience to have people give you these nuggets of information that, you know, that have actually been applied in, you know, like really successful franchises.
Yeah, they the other thing as well is that because you have that one-on-one, all the tips they give you are like you're guaranteed to be applicable to what you're doing. They are tailored for you, which I don't think there's any other kind of scenario where that's going to happen. Even in something like a lecture at uni, you've still got like 30 other students, so they're going to teach things, or they're going to, the stuff's going to be much more kind of broad appeal that's going to apply more generically, rather than, hey, in this really specific instance, you could do this, or this would work here, and this would like help you here, rather than, like even taking something like composition, right? You can give general broad rules for composition, but actually getting in and showing that within a specific scene of you could do this with this to help, do this and this, which is incredibly non-generic. But I mean, like things like, rather than just saying, "Oh, you can use rule of thirds" or whatever, but showing you specifically how that can actually work, and how you can fit that into your workflow. And I think that's something that can probably sticks around a lot better than just reading it or watching a video on ArtStation Learning or something.
Yeah, I think that's just in the nature of the mentorship, right? I mean, no one can really fault a teacher for not having the time to share, personal one-on-one experience with 30 students or whatever the case may be. So I think what you said, Tim, just, having your mentor physically having your scene in front of them, dragging stuff around, playing with it, and just, getting it to the point where they'd be happy with it, and then explaining to you exactly why it's better now than it was before. I think that's so much more valuable than just, as you said, this is rule of thirds, this is why it looks good type of thing.
Yeah, it's even like during my classes, there were moments where lecturers gave individual students feedback on their work. But even then, there's like, you've been given an hour for the class. There's, say, since it was online lectures at the time, there's like, I don't know, maybe 15 people who have showed up. They're all waiting to get individual feedback. It's even then, even though it's one-on-one in that sense, and also some of the offhand comments can help everyone else who's in the lecture. There's still like okay, well, we only have 5 minutes to talk to you, 5 minutes to talk to you, 5 minutes to talk to you. And it's just, even in a one-on-one situation in that case, it doesn't help as much because you don't really have the time blocked out to actually look at everything and play around with the, say, like the scenes, or in my case, the designer files and the nodes, and actually figure out what the issues is that you have with the project, that you what actually needs to be improved.
And I think you can also like Alfie said, we both went into our weekly meetings with a list of questions and stuff like that. And I think the nice thing about a mentorship call where, they're not particularly strict, at least Joby wasn't, and I'm sure Josh wouldn't be either with, it's not exactly an hour time limit. So, if it goes half an hour over time, I think most of the mentors are more than happy to do that because they're extremely, extremely passionate about it. So I think in that time where you go over, there's time for just like little random things that you both notice that you can go through, which isn't specifically on your list of questions and, won't be covered in the 5-minute uni lecture, for example.
Yeah, it's a lot more kind of fluid because, say, a lecture, you'll sit there, you'll have a specific topic that you're going to be taught about that day that is generic as possible so that it can apply to everyone. And whereas in the mentorships, you're just having a conversation really about what you've done. You have the questions that you think of beforehand and get answered, but it's really just kind of, in a sense, just you're hanging out, you're talking about the project, and it's just a lot more natural in the way it goes about, which helps with the learning, I think.
Well, it's in their interest, right, for you to succeed as much as possible, right? However way they can help that. Obviously, not going to take up 50 hours of their time, right? But as much as they can give in little bits and pieces here extra that they, if they value you and if you value them and you're not just wasting their time by, I don't know, coming in with a scene that's not changed week over week or whatever, right? And you show that they care, they're going to care too. So if you come out of it with an excellent scene or material or prop or whatever, and that's A, good advertisement, and B, like it shows that this person that's given the mentorship cares a lot. So I think it's it's good that you get these little extra bits and pieces, and it makes you feel appreciated too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, right? You only really get as much out of it as you put in. I think exactly. I don't know if it's as prevalent in mentorships. I don't know if this is another conversation for another time, but I'd guess that with the significant upfront investment of money that it is a mentorship, I would guess that most people take it seriously and do put quite a lot of effort into it, which may not be the case for quite a few people at university. But that's definitely,
which is funny, right? Because university is expensive too.
Yeah,
it's a lot more money.
It's a deferred cost, though, I guess, so that it's easier to not see when you haven't had to physically hand the money over. It's I guess less impactful.
Yeah, you feel the burn a lot quicker with a mentorship once you fork out the money for one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, my 57 grand of student loans just going to sit there for 30 years until it disappears, right? So.
Yeah. But I think that's having that kind of cost is a good thing in a sense, because you are more likely to take it seriously. It is something. It's not like maybe a tutorial on ArtStation. You're like, oh, it's on sale, 50% off. It's only £10. Let me buy that, and it just sits there in your ArtStation library forever. It's something that does take time and like a decent monetary commitment, where you're more likely to take it seriously and invest in it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing one if you're not going to take it seriously, but I think that's part of it, that it's something that is like, this is, these aren't just anyone. These guys are proper industry professionals who are giving up time in their evenings outside of working their 8 hours a day to help other people.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because, Luan, you mentioned your 57 grand or whatever it is. I sort of choked on my water, but when I heard that figure. But
it's probably more now. I haven't checked in a few years.
Yeah, dude. But I mean, obviously a mentorship is not nearly as expensive as that. It's obviously not 4 years either, but I mean, it is still a significant investment for the time that you are getting. But I'd be interested to hear from Alfie, who has had the typical university course for game arts. I sort of felt with my mentorship that, I'd be doing 3D for 2 years as a hobbyist, maybe before I jumped into it full time. But I honestly felt like I learned more in that month than I did in the 2 years prior. So I wondered if as a university student for this specifically, could you relate to that at all?
Yeah, 100%. The thing is, because I'm a material artist, it's a lot more specific and like heavily focused. But we didn't cover materials like at all, really. And so from like my specific focus, I definitely got more out of the month of mentorship that I did than I did for most of university. And around the same point as well, like I had only been doing 3D for 2 years when I did the mentorship. Since before university, I wasn't even into art at all. I was a programmer before then, so it's kind of the same level of experience, and I definitely got more from it than I did throughout university.
Yeah, I think that focus helps, right? Like,
yeah,
if I had done a mentorship after university, I think I probably would have, for starters, learned a lot earlier on exactly where I wanted to take my career. Whereas when I was in university, I sort of focused on all kinds of different things. Every I guess 3 months or 6 months, I don't remember exactly, you would deliver a very different kind of thing, like an environment or a character or a piece of concept art, and then you would start to focus up and start to learn exactly what you wanted to do, because obviously you have to experiment a little bit. But never would you have that, and it's no fault of their own, but never would you have that focused, very relevant industry experience that will tell you, oh, this is how you should be going on about this kind of stuff. Now, it's really, I guess university is really trying to guide you on your own learning more so, right? Which is good and bad. There's pros and cons. I think I enjoyed a lot of aspects about that, but I really put in a lot of hard work because I just cared a lot, right? But it does make me wonder, had I done a mentorship either instead or after university, if I would have found my career goals a lot faster, right?
Well, the thing is, I think that the mentorships are really for the people who have decided, this is what I want to do. I want to focus on this specific discipline or whatever, rather than for the people who are kind of exploring everything. Because I only did mine after I'd chosen, yes, materials is what I want to focus on, because I did it alongside my like final year project, which was like a big material pack, which most of will never see the light of day. But it's like I personally would only recommend a mentorship after you've thought about it and gone, okay, this is what I enjoy the most. I want to learn more about this specific discipline or this specific area of the industry, and go down that route instead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but I guess in the same vein, what I'm thinking is like I always knew I wanted to hop into environment art because it's kind of what I enjoyed doing the most, but I didn't know exactly what aspect of environment art or what kind of artist I would be, right? So it took me actually quite a few years to really kind of understand who I was within environment art. Did I like pushing the technical aspects? Did I like pushing the multidiscipline, like connectivity, everybody talking to each other, getting an environment done? Did I like doing the actual literal artwork itself, right? And I think something that could be quite powerful as well is, let's say you've been in industry for a few years and you picked up on a lot of tricks, you picked up on some ideas, and you're ready to sort of really push yourself. Maybe doing a mentorship after a few years is also a really good idea there, right? Something I actually think about myself from time to time, even.
Yeah, I still think about doing like another mentorship even to help push myself further. And like something I've been enjoying a lot recently is the technical aspects of designer and trying to explore that a bit more. But and there's mentorships now. I think Ben Wilson does something like that, and using mentorships even after you've made it, you've gotten into the industry, is definitely a good way to help define the path that you go down.
It's interesting, Luan, because we'll never really know, right? Because like Alfie and I don't really know where we would have ended up if we hadn't taken that mentorship. So we can't really accredit all of our progress in our careers due to that, because we didn't take the other route. So yeah, but going back to what Alfie said about taking mentorships at a later stage in your career, I think there's definitely a sweet spot for it, because I do get quite a few people asking me, is this the right time to take a mentorship? Am I ready for this? So I think there's a stage after you've not mastered, but you've got to grasps with the basic fundamentals. But I also don't personally know if I'd be able to handle a mentorship right now, because we were talking about getting out what you put in, and I think lots of students do really well with mentorships because they have that sort of full month and nothing really else besides sleeping and eating that they can just put towards that. I don't know how. I mean, obviously there's tons to learn from these seniors and principals and leads and all of that, but I think, after an 8-hour workday, I wonder at the efficientness of that.
I mean, it's hard, right? Like, after work, I'm certainly tired. Even on good days where like I absolutely adored what I was doing and I was full of energy after work, I have to find a way to unwind a little bit. Lately, more so than ever, and not because of any problems at work or anything, but I just find that as time goes on, I need to just to switch off a little bit, right? So yeah, I can totally see what you're saying, but I mean, it's good the people that do have the energy extra to give to someone else, essentially, right? After an 8-hour day of work, you really that you're sort of in good hands with someone like that. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's if you do have the energy after work to put in the time on a personal project and you have the mentorship at the weekend and everything, I think if you have that energy and you have that time and I guess focus, it's definitely a good use of your time. It's, if anything, to like kind of help speed things up a bit. Some people might get a bit bogged down about, I don't know, I'm only a junior, I want to get to this point, I'm not as good as I want to be now. I think if you do have that extra, I guess, focus, it's definitely a good use of your time. But I do think there's a sweet spot if you've gone to uni, post uni, pre-industry, where that's like the time for mentorships, right? Because I did mine during university, and I honestly feel like that was kind of a mistake. I mean, grades and such don't matter as much to getting in the industry as your portfolio, but I definitely, for that month where I did the mentorship, I just pushed everything else from university to the side. And I did have a lot of other things that I needed to do during that month.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I've spent a lot of money on this mentorship. I'm going to put 100% into it. And that, in the end, kind of pushed everything back. And it made it quite a struggle towards the end of university to like catch up, because I missed an entire month of work on everything.
Yeah.
But so whenever someone has like, I've had a few people who are like not lower down, just starting university or in their second year. And they've said like, hey Alfie, should I do this mentorship? Am I ready to do this mentorship? Am I good enough? And I've said like, just wait until you're finished. You can take what you're proud of from your university work and just push it that extra bit further after university with a mentorship, and like hit that top bar, essentially.
It's good advice, to be honest.
I think I'd agree with that sweet spot, just right outside of university before entering the industry. However, I think in favor of like a point in favor of taking a mentorship when you're sort of mid or even getting towards senior, I think the mentorship coalition also offers like career coachings and stuff like that. So if maybe you don't even want help with your art at all, but perhaps you want help with approaching your work about getting a promotion to a senior or a lead, and sort of the unique responsibilities and challenges that come with that. I mean, these people are uniquely qualified to speak to you about that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all about the art. I think there are a lot of soft skills that go into these mentorships as well.
That's a good thing. That's like a point in the university's favor. Like, you get a lot of practice dealing with people while you're at university. That I guess if you're just, I don't know, maybe fresh out of college, going and like just you've decided that's it, I want to do games art, I'm going to teach myself everything. I guess if you've not had the university experience where you get to be surrounded by artists and people who are similar to you and get to speak with people and deal with people, the mentorships do kind of make up with that, because you're essentially having somewhat regular contact with someone who is you are probably going to like not want to embarrass yourself in front of.
Yeah.
By doing the mentorship, especially with there's other options, like you can do even longer ones. Some people might want to invest in that. It's also a good way to like bump up those soft skills, which are also incredibly important with getting into the industry and being in the industry.
I think that does go back to the conversation that I think a lot of people have, like the whole university versus mentorship discussion, which I don't personally like to have because I don't think it's as black and white, or as one or the other. But I think lots of people do say that in favor of universities, and I certainly felt that as well, that you do really gain those social skills during that time, whether it's, group projects where one person does absolutely nothing and you have to deal with that. I mean, hey, that might be your coworker one day. So you sort of do have to get used to those types of things.
Yeah, I think mentorships work very well in addition to other types. They're not really I think if you were just doing mentorships on their own, you probably wouldn't get the most benefit out of it. Alongside something like Alfie, so if you've done a degree already, it gives you space to do something really curated with someone really experienced. Or if you've been self-learning, like you're saying, Cairo, it gives you that space to kind of get validation on, was I learning the right things? Do I know the right workflows? Kind of on its own, you're probably not going to get as much out of it, because the stuff they teach you, or the stuff that you guys were saying you were learning, it's not sort of the straight technical, here's how you push polys, but kind of the bigger picture stuff. And if you haven't got that foundation from somewhere else, then you're not going to be able to sort of do it at that level. And I'm sure they do have people who are less familiar with stuff, and they're able to kind of come in at a lower level and talk about some of that stuff. But I think the biggest benefit is getting their really good, active, current, up to date games experience from senior lead people who are in big studios right now.
I'm really interested to see where the future of mentorships is going, because maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think mentorships, the companies themselves, have actually like really expanded in recent years. Just recently, I think Skilltree is a new one. You've got your CGMAs and all of those. So I think it's going to be interesting to see in the future what the balance between formal education and sort of like the mentorship process is going to be like. I mean, I suppose at the moment, the real big difference between the two is the fact that university presents you with a diploma or a degree, whereas mentorship obviously doesn't. So yeah, that's also something to consider for people if you'd like to work abroad, type of thing.
Exactly. That's something I was going to touch on, because if I would have wanted to go to America, having a master's, having a degree helps a ton to get that that visa, because I think I'm probably wrong here, but if you have a master's, you need a lot less time in industry to get a visa, whereas if you don't, you need something like 10 years of experience, or maybe 15 even, I'm not too sure, but you need a lot more time essentially. So that's, I think, one thing that you got to consider is like, hey, do I want to go to that US studio pretty much ASAP because it's my dream studio and I really want to work there? Like, then I should probably go for a university course. But to answer sort of your previous point, I can kind of see a day where mentorships are not exactly just one-to-one, but maybe they're a little bit more of a focus group, right? Where sort of it's not exactly a diploma that you're getting at the end of the day, or maybe even is just a diploma by that small company. But maybe that is sort of like a class hybrid. I can see something like that happening. It depends on how much this grows and what the demand is, but I think something like that could be quite powerful too.
Yeah, I think CGMA have sort of similar things, but everything's still on a smaller scale than something like a full kind of 3-year degree.
Yeah.
I think there are sort of various places doing little bits. It's just at some point, someone might come together and kind of put something together on a bit of a larger scale and bring up something that can rival a full degree. But like you're saying, the bit of paper that you get at the end of the day is actually valued quite highly in a lot of places. So it's a degree. Having the degree alone is never kind of a bad thing, even if perhaps the lessons and things that you got while you were at university weren't the same quality as you could have got from doing it some other way.
Everyone's different. Everyone's going to get something else out of it, right?
Yeah. It's definitely, like, speaking in my own experiences, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to university. I just knew I liked games and I wanted to work on games. So in that sense, it was like a good space to explore my options. And then I went down the material art path, and the degree, even though I guess the degree itself it's not like the deciding factor as to whether or not you're good enough to be in the industry. It does open doors for you, which otherwise would be closed unless you were highly valuable in the eyes of other governments.
Yeah.
So,
specifically US governments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not everyone necessarily learns in a way that kind of self-teaching and doing kind of online courses and a mentorship as exclusive way of learning. Not everyone learns in a way that would work. Some people need the structure of university. Of you go in, you obviously with online it's a bit different at the moment, but in the kind of traditional sense of a building to go into, a place to be with other like-minded people, somewhere to kind of grow as a person rather than just necessarily improve your technical abilities.
Yeah, that was definitely what I needed. having the structure around me, and like having my friends who were also going to university, also doing the same things as me, and the culture around it all just kind of reinforcing everything. And it helps a lot more than just me teaching myself at home. I'm not too good at that. I've gotten better since going to university. It helps teach you that. But I'm definitely someone who needs that structure that wouldn't be offered by being taught on your own and taking mentorships to help supplement it.
Yeah, I think my own personal self-development as a person, nothing to do with my artist side or anything, hugely benefited from a university, personally. I wouldn't change that for the world, to be honest. That was such a great time I had there.
Yeah. In terms of like keeping yourself focused with that structure from university, I think that also depends a lot on, like you were speaking about, Alfie, have you realized what direction you want to go in yet? Because as I said, I was a terrible student in university, like couldn't count on me to build a bridge to save anyone's lives. But since I've found what I feel to be is like my passion in life, which is game art, I think that sort of grounded me very quickly. So even though I wasn't a particularly good student, I think university did teach me those social skills, as we've mentioned, and it also did lead me in the right direction. So I wouldn't discount it at all. I wouldn't say that I disregard those experiences at all. They were definitely really, really helpful in shaping me to the career that I wanted.
It seems like the kind of consensus is that they work really well together. And we've talked a bit about the kind of differences between them, but what would you say the biggest difference, or like some less obvious differences between having someone teach you in university and someone teaching you in the mentorship? Yeah, I guess for Alfie, and then we'll do the same with self-learning for Cairo.
Honestly, the biggest difference for me is really just the amount of focus that I got from the mentorship than I did during all my classes. Since I'm a material artist, I went down the material art route. There's not really a lot of formal learning for that. Or formal teaching. So it's like, in that sense, whereas before I did the mentorship, I had to weave materials into every single thing that I could. I basically found every single excuse to sit in Designer and make something that I could in order to help progress my skills. But the mentorship really helps provide like that level of focus of doing what you want to do and learning about what you want to learn. That that was kind of like, that's the biggest difference for me, rather than trying to find lessons in lessons from what I was being taught that applied to what I wanted to do. In a way, I didn't have to figure out what it was that they were teaching and how it could be applied to what I did. Instead, it was everything was applicable, and that level of focus actually helps a lot more.
And on the flip side, then for Cairo, what kind of is a difference that you thought was particularly interesting between going and sort of having been teaching yourself how to make stuff for games and what you learned in the mentorship?
Well, firstly, drawing on a little bit of uni experience with lecturers, I'm not too sure how it is around the rest of the world, but I know specifically in South Africa, there's a very strict relationship between students and lecturers. You're not very buddy-buddy with your lecturers. You don't really laugh around with them after class or anything. You don't really get to know them as people. So there's sort of a distance between the students and the faculty in that sort of sense, which I think obviously can't be related to the mentorship experience at all, because there's someone that is there trying to actively help you progress further in your career, while at the same time, you're sort of opening boundaries between yourselves, discussing your personal lives and your journeys, personal and otherwise. So it's really cool to have that kind of personal connection with someone, even if it's only for the space of the month, and you correspond briefly afterwards. I think there's that. And then there's also the fact that I think there's definitely a place in art and in video games for the traditional master apprentice relationship that was like more of a traditional art thing back in the day. I think there's something really valuable in the one-on-one connections. So, for example, when I was self-learning, it's technically one-on-one, but there's no back and forth. So I think the ability to be able to elaborate your thoughts to someone else who can then relate to your specific instance and your circumstances and respond with that in mind, I think that's really, really cool. And yeah,
I think that experience is different with everybody. I think for the most part, you're right, probably like 90% right. I think I've had a few situations, my own experience myself, where I've gotten quite close to some of the tutors and we've sort of become friends over time and stuff like that. But I think for the most part, you won't find that for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely like a level of separation at university. Even if like my lectures were pretty casual. I remember during lockdown, we had a lecturer who was just cooking a curry during one of our lectures. And you don't really get that in most traditional schooling. It depends where you are, like what the culture is where you are, where you go. But it is having that personal aspect during the mentorship definitely makes it feel a lot more involved. Like there's personal investment into it as well as monetary investment.
Yeah.
I think also these days, I'm sure Alfie can speak more coherently on this than I can, but mentorships really aren't so different to unis these days, especially now that unis are online for the most part, at least for the past nearly 2 years.
Yeah. In that sense, the experience wasn't too much different.
I bet.
It was honestly quite a struggle doing the final year of university at home in a lockdown. But yeah, I guess it doesn't differ that much at the moment. It will go back to normal, although I think a lot of universities have seen where things can be online, where it's better online, and are keeping that. So they're probably, between mentorships and unis being like in person versus online, it's going to be a lot more similar nowadays. So I guess that experience won't be as contrasting as it was before, but at least in recent times it was very similar in that sense. But even then, it still felt very different with like the personal element, and I mean it being on Discord instead of Microsoft Teams was a lot different.
You mean it worked?
Yeah, pretty much.
Classic Teams.
Something I just thought of is I've never really thought about this since I was self-taught, but the idea of grading art as they would in a university still seems very bizarre to me. I mean, obviously they have to do it. You need a binary yes or no. Did you pass your degree? But I think that's something that I've never ever thought about until the second. The fact that mentorships are completely, they're not objective at all. It's not you got this mark in your mentorship, you did really well, congrats, have a sticker, go get a job. It's completely subjective.
Yeah. It's
kind of want a sticker though.
That would be nice, yeah. Or like a gold star, maybe I could stick on my CV.
You can message Josh that.
I will, yeah.
Tell him get Mentorship Coalition stickers.
But yeah, having that, like, I guess it's also less pressure. Even though portfolio is king, you always want to focus on that. Your grade is and always will be directly related to whatever criteria has been set out for you to achieve. And in a lot of cases, it will just be, have you met this criteria? Okay, cool, you get a good grade. Even if the piece of art is completely outstanding, it could get a bad grade because you've just not done what they've asked. And in that sense, like, mentorships don't have that, I guess, peer pressure to do specific things. You can focus on what you enjoy, what you want to create, and just that in itself will turn out like a better piece of art than having all these standards set for you immediately.
And like you said, because those standards are sort of arbitrary to a certain extent, and I think at this point in time with some unis, they are sort of outdated a little bit, if I dare say it. But so a lot of people attach their self-worth to their grades, which I think is something that you definitely don't have to worry about in a sort of one-on-one subjective experience like this.
Absolutely.
Very much so. I think that to kind of summarize the takeaway, it seems like the mentorship, you kind of have that experience of someone who's a commercial artist that puts them in a position where they kind of know what is and isn't used, what is and isn't marketable, as opposed to in university where it's a much more academic setting focused around sometimes very rigid teachings, and that kind of flexibility gives you a lot more control over what you do, and also the experience of the person is perhaps more relevant to something specifically to you rather than a more broad sense. And we're going to have to start wrapping up on that note. All of the Patreons are so mesmerized by Cairo's voice that no one has asked any questions. So we're going to end with a Luan's bonus question.
All right. Okay, cool. If you could have a mentorship with literally anyone at all, it doesn't have to be games industry. I want to know who that is. Cairo, you go first.
Oh, shit.
You can say Bill Gates.
This guy, Luan, Vetoreti.
Nah.
Dude, that is such a tough question. Oh,
I know, that's why I asked.
Let me think. Who's my favorite environment artist? There's a guy I think he's at Respawn. His name's Stephen Hong, I believe. I think I got that right.
I know the one.
Yeah, he has done some absolutely bonkers stuff, especially recently. And I sort of just look at that. I'm like, this doesn't seem like how did you do this? I cannot put this together. Yeah, that's a random one off the top of my head, but that's it.
Good one. Alfie?
I think for me, you said it doesn't have to be industry, but
It doesn't have to be, no?
like 50% of what I think about. So I'd say the person, if I could have a mentorship with, it would be Andrei Zelenko. I might have said that wrong. I think they might work for Adobe. I'm not entirely sure, but they are heavily deep into like the technical side of Substance Designer, to the point where they've created fluid dynamic systems and all sorts of absolutely crazy stuff that I would absolutely love to learn about.
Yeah, that stuff's pretty dope.
I would love to just be able to pick their brain for a day.
Yeah.
And learn.
Tim?
Me?
Yeah.
I think I'd probably go with Tyler Smith. I've had him on the podcast before, but that guy is just so creative, and I just wanted to know where they'll come up with, because I don't know anyone who just cranks out such different work. It's just it's so out there. Yeah, all of them are just so, they're like mind blowing each time. Yeah, he just has such a good eye for the big picture.
Tyler does make me feel inadequate on a daily basis.
Come home like every evening, like another environment.
Stop it, please.
Luan, you've got to ask your own question.
I will.
Yeah.
I already know. I've thought about this for many years. For me, is Jason Jones, who's one of the co-founders of Bungie. Just need to sit down with him for an hour or few hours for a few weeks and just learn about that process, what it's like making those games with so much passion that they've made, that I'm so invested in, because it's just something I just want to pick their brain, but yeah, that's me.
Nice. Right, well, on that note, thank you to both Cairo and Alfie for being guests and joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And thank you to Luan for helping the host.
Indeed.
Yeah. If you want to check out some more EXP goodness, come on to Discord and chat with us, or head over to the website and read some articles. But until next time, have a good one. Take care and bye.
Goodbye.